I'm no David Starkey, but I do think we should look back on things in order to get a plan together to move forward. And something that sticks out blindingly obvious to me when I look back at this recent information released by the National Archives, it's in an article in the Telegraph about what caused Tony Blair to accept unfettered immigration from the former Soviet bloc countries who joined the EU in 2004 and were immediately allowed to come trailing into Great Britain seeking jobs and houses and benefits. Now, this was a massive blunder that any man in the street would have recognised. The man in the street saw it like this: why are you allowing people from deprived countries who have only had the freedom a short length of time, are on poor wages with no hopes for the future, why are you allowing them to come trailing into our country taking jobs and housing and using health services and schools that we need? That's what the man in the street saw. Unless you were a lefty, unless you were from a middle class family and you had a cousin called Pippa who saw it completely differently. Of course, let's welcome everyone in here. We can afford to have all of them come as long as it's not in the Cotswolds. You see, this is where the common man has more insight into what's needed to run the country. You must never do yourself down for thinking that you didn't agree with the government. The government often gets it wrong, in fact seldom gets it right. And here's how it unfolded. So as this happened, the Prime Minister ignored advice from Jack Straw, who was then his Foreign Minister, and John Prescott, his deputy, who foresaw the fact it could cause an influx in immigration. Sadly, Tony Blair was an Eton boy and he had a good education and was cushioned from reality. So they don't see it like we do. We can understand that people who have been deprived of their freedom for many years, and then after they gained the freedom through glasnost, and then the Soviet Union collapsing, that they're not going to be in a good place. They're going to want to go to a better place, and now we've given them facilities to do it, which is come to Britain, get a job, bring your family, get benefits, we'll sort your housing out. That was never going to work. Ordinary people could see that, because too many people would want to seize that opportunity. It's never the migrant, it's never the immigrant that's at fault with immigration problems. It's the people controlling the country, and we just lacked the common sense to sort it out. Now, ironically, at the time, other European countries were already putting blockades in place where they had to be in the country for 2 years before they could claim benefits in certain European countries, and in fact places like Austria abstained altogether from taking them at the time. It was an evolving thing. It never stayed in the same place. But the thing being that Prescott and Jack Straw forewarned him. Sadly, Tony Blair was persuaded that migrants were needed to boost the economy, but within weeks of the former Soviet bloc countries joining the EU in 2004, the numbers arriving were far outstripping earlier estimated numbers. Now, they already knew that. They saw it unfolding before their eyes and they did nothing. They actually thought in their ego that what would happen is Britain would welcome them in, allow them to join in everything we've got, and other European countries would follow. But they didn't. Other European countries handled it different, with different legislation and criteria that had to be met before you got in their countries. Far more sensible. Unfortunately, whilst his two main advisors, Jack Straw, the Foreign Minister, and Prescott, were saying, no, don't do it, Tony, Blunkett, Westminster's answer to Stevie Wonder, decided that it would be an excellent idea to boost the economy. And Blair listened to him and allowed it to happen. Now, quite clearly, if you've been living in a downtrodden nation that's not had freedom very long, that's been under the Soviet grip, you're going to want to get to a country that gives you more opportunities. Now, in these former Soviet bloc countries, things like their family allowance was something like £3 a week, where here it was 20. So even just to claim family allowance would be a massive lift. Now, a lot of people don't realise, but 47,000 Polish girls actually arrived here on a given period of time and got jobs. They came through agencies where once they arrived, they were given work. They worked for 6 weeks and then would announce to their employer that they were pregnant. They were already pregnant before they came, but they wanted to get to Britain first before it was announced. Why? Because that gave them access to British maternity leave, British maternity benefits, and child benefit for the rest of the child's life till it left education, even if they took the offspring back to Poland, which 47,000 of them did. They went back to Poland knowing full well that for the next 17 years, at least, they could claim child benefit at British rates rather than their own. That in itself was a huge drain, which was emphasised by all the others that were coming in. More from the piece. Net EU migration subsequently rose to hundreds of thousands a year, despite the Home Office predicting the impact on numbers from the 8 former Soviet bloc countries would be relatively limited. Now, from my point of view, how could you even think it would be limited? Common sense tells the layman in the street, there's someone who's lived under communist rule and suddenly has the opportunity to go where he wants, when he wants, for a better life. And some of them even came over and left more educated jobs. You got architects coming over to Britain to work on building sites because the pay on the building site was even better than what they got for their accredited profession. One official said they faced an elephant trap and advised ministers to err on the side of publishing less rather than more information when it came to releasing official data. Now, an elephant trap, it's a chess term when it's a move that only a fool would take when there's no other option available. That's what it is. It's a metaphor for a foolish move that a fool would take. And sadly, Tony Blair took it. Jack Straw and John Prescott wanted Sir Tony Blair to rethink Britain's open border policy to new EU membership credit. Mr Straw later admitted that the failure to put in place any transitional controls, as nearly all other European countries did, was a spectacular mistake which had far-reaching consequences. Now, the far-reaching consequences evolved into much more than just whether or not they took up British jobs. They were allowed to join in Help to Buy schemes for houses. The criteria for that was that you weren't allowed to own any other property if you're going on a Help to Buy scheme. Often they would go into the sales bureaus of these new developments and say, yes, I want to buy a house here. And the people in the office would say, do you own any other property? Yes, I have a house in Poland. And they say, you don't qualify. Within 2 days, the couple or individual would leave the sales office. Now, I've got this on good authority from someone who was selling these type of properties at the time. They'd leave the office and come back 48 hours later with the same request, want to have a Help to Buy. And they'd say then, do you own any other properties? No, we sold. Now, you and I know nobody sold anything in 48 hours. It's a lie, but it got through the system. And they swamped that Help to Buy stock. One of the biggest driving forces for a referendum on leaving the EU was the fact we could see the country was being swamped with Eastern European immigration. It was great for the Eastern Europeans because they could come over here and work as fruit pickers, live in a caravan and send their money home. Much more money than they would have ever earned in their own countries. But there were other problems. Cheap labour from Poland and other new EU member states was blamed for undercutting British workers. It later helped pave the way for Brexit as successive governments struggled to get the numbers back under control. And don't forget, all these moves were made anticipating in their foolishness that other EU states would follow, like France and Germany, Austria, but they didn't. They didn't open the borders like us. So we then became the magnet for Eastern Europeans to come to because other options were harder to get in. And in these released documents, which is a great article in the Telegraph, it says, however, with less than 3 months to go, Mr Straw wrote to the Prime Minister calling for a rethink on the policy, warning that the situation had changed dramatically in the intervening period. Urgent action must be taken if we do not think this through now. I believe we could be faced with a difficult situation in early May and could then be forced to take urgent action then to suspend the concessions in the least propitious of circumstances, he wrote. Now, It's getting warning after warning, but it's also getting worked on by people like Blunkett, obviously. He'd have to send notes in Braille, wouldn't he? But people always assume that because someone's got a disability, they're a nice person. It's not necessarily true. The documents then tell us that France, Germany, Spain, Austria, Belgium, Finland, Greece and Luxembourg all imposed transition periods of at least 2 years before they could claim on the system. Now that gives them time to get jobs, that gives them time to contribute, to put something back into the community instead of drawing down on it all the time. Now, where I think this is important is forget they came from the Eastern Bloc. They came from a place where they wanted a better life and they chose Britain because it was easy to get in. And that's just what's happening now. They're coming from a place, whatever it is, where they want a better life. And Britain is so easy to get that better life for them that even though they can stop off in Germany, France, Belgium, Austria, Slovenia, Slovakia and every other country in Europe, they still migrate to the channel to get across to come to us because we're still an easy touch, because we're still not recognising that these politicians are out of touch. Someone like Tony Blair or David Cameron or even, Prescott was a bit more in touch because he was working class. But even Theresa May and John Major and all these people we've had leading this country are not in touch with the people and are not listening to the people. The working man, the average working man who's lived in a town that's been affected by mass immigration knows exactly how to handle it, which is control it, integrate, deport. That's all you need to do. Control it, integrate and deport. Now, as a layman, I would suggest that if we're getting swamped, which we are, the thing to do is to increase the workforce in border force, process claims quicker. Why can Austria get rid of their claims in 6 weeks and we take years? What is that about? For a start, they should not be able to challenge a failed claim by using our legal aid system. It's unfortunate if you do have a case and you do want to come in and you are genuine. I understand that's unfortunate, but life is unfortunate, and it's unfortunate now for a lot of pensioners who have had their winter heating allowance cut off because we're choosing to send money on batshit schemes abroad. It's wrong. It's wrong to penalise our farmers while we're subsidising foreign farmers. It's wrong. Everybody knows it's wrong. Foreign aid being written into law, it's wrong. Net zero being written into law, it's wrong. They're out of touch, they're completely unsuitable, and this is why what I see when I look at reform, I see Nigel Farage who's had a normal job in a normal sphere in finance. I see Rupert Lowe who's a farmer. I see, what's he called? Lee Anderson. All right, I can see him with a ferret up his trousers, having a pint at Working Men's Club, Lee, with his thumbs tucked down his jeans. What I'm trying to get at here is the guy's lived a normal life. Not only that, he's been down a pit to put food on his table. So he's lived a normal life and you can see what he wants. He tells you every day of the week. We're a soft touch because our politicians are too comfortable in their role as politicians. They should at least have some life experience. If you look at some of the better politicians that we've had, like David Davis, they've had a normal life. He worked at Tate and Lyle. He was in industry. You look at Andrea Jenkins, she was in work in normal life. These people aren't normal people. They go into politics from college, from university. They're institutionalised. And that's why a white paper lands on their desk or a fax comes in or an email comes in telling you to wear a mask or roll your sleeve up. They go and do it because they're institutionalised thinkers. They're not free thinkers that have had to live on their wits and etch your life out with no formal education and try and work up a ladder of promotion within a company or start a small business or be self-employed or fit into society. And not only that, juggle life-work balance, sorting your kids out, taking them to football practice, doing whatever you do to make your family successful. They're not in touch with us. They're out of touch with us. The attraction to reform is they're in touch. The use of social media proves it. You've got every single MP telling you what they're doing, but real things, commenting on what's happening. The dismay at what they see when they're in the House of Commons. They tell you on their Twitter page. They're on TikTok. Nigel Farage now has 5.5 million followers. How come? Because whether you like him or you don't like him, when he's talking on social media, he's talking to you. He's not talking at you. The others, like Ed Miliband and Rory Stewart, they don't talk to you. They patronise you with sound bites and stupid gimmicks. We're past that. We're sick of it. We're sick of the way we're being treated. And that's the big attraction to reform. They've got another MP who's just a normal bloke. Great stuff. Not a particular expert in politics. What are you an expert in? If you're an expert in politics, you just know how the system works. That doesn't mean you're any good at running a country. And it certainly doesn't mean you're any good at understanding people's problems. Matt Hancock, a clear example, shut the old people's homes down. The one thing you've got left when you're old is access to your family and your loved ones. You've had everything else stripped away by life itself. You've not been able to live in your own home because you can't manage it anymore. So that's therefore forced you to sell all the possessions that you've built up over your life, and you have to watch them go in a house clearance. They've already had all those hard knocks and then sit in a home with strangers they don't know. Some of people in there are only incapacitated physically. So mentally they understand exactly what's happening to them. But a politician who was getting his rocks off on locking down whilst groping Gina, sticking his tongue down her throat while he was telling you not to go in other households. She didn't live with him. She lived out of his house. He lived with his wife. And he was doing that while you couldn't see your granny. And it's all the same issue. They're out of touch. They do not understand us. They do not try to understand us. They want to get on with getting on, and we clutter it up for them. Well, now that Reform have got as far as they've got with 5 MPs and more councils coming along day by day, we're going to clutter it up a lot more. We're going to clutter it up so much you're going to have to listen. Because what's going to happen, the tables will turn and we won't have to listen to you anymore. Because you'll be listening to us through the representatives that we put in, not the ones that just get the seats because nobody bothered to vote. You're going to have to listen to us because our representatives will be standing in Westminster taking you on big time.